You're now watching the Danny Mac podcast on the Bet Rivers Network.
Thanks for being with me. Weekend edition. Yes, got to work overtime. It's Super Bowl week. I'm Dan McNeil, and it's the Danny Mac podcast on the Bet Rivers Podcast Network. And I want to remind you, Bet Rivers is offering a second chance bet on your first same-game parlay on the big game. Place a qualifying same-game parlay on the big game. And if your bet loses, you get a bonus bet equal to your wager. With your same-game parlay bet, you also can even earn a square that can be worth as much as $10,000. See the Bet Rivers app for full details and bet on the big game at Bet Rivers. I haven't talked much football lately. With the Hall of Fame, with the stir over how bizarre media week is at the Super Bowl. It's good to talk some football with a student of the game, Wayne Larrivee, the veteran voice of the Green Bay Packers, with me today. Man, it seems like forever since Championship Sunday. Let's kick the damn ball, Wayne. Is that how you're feeling?
Exactly. I got to tell you, Danny, first off, it's great to be on with you as always. We go way back. I mean, way back to the days when WGN was out there where the TV studio is on Bradley Place, off of, what was it, Addison Street in Chicago.
Addison,
gosh,
yeah.
almighty. Anyway, no, it's good because, we've had 2 weeks to look at this thing, and I don't think you need 2 weeks to look at this game. These are the two teams that have emerged. The best team in the AFC, I thought, this year overall was Baltimore, and they were the best team in the league. But, when you're Patrick Mahomes, you're the Chiefs, you've won a couple of Super Bowls, you win some games maybe because of who you are more than the fact that you're so much better than the team you just beat. And I'm talking specifically about the game against the Ravens. And then you're the San Francisco 49ers, and they were the best team, I think, in the NFC overall this year. But in the AFC, I would put them about third best in that end of it over the course of the season. Still, we got a good Super Bowl matchup, though, with Mahomes and the Chiefs and the 49ers.
I don't think what is being said about Mahomes is hyperbole. I think he's earning to be mentioned in the same breath as the all-time greats. But I don't think the Chiefs get enough credit for what they do defensively. And Andy Reid, very sneaky, has been ground Andy these last several years in the postseason. I think that's going to play a huge factor in whether they win or lose this week. I like their running game, and nobody talks about it.
Yeah, I agree. Pacheco has given them, Dan, a toughness, okay? This is a guy who can go between the tackles and get you yards, and meaningful yards between the tackles, 3-4 yards when you need 1 or 2. But the other thing about Pacheco is he's also a guy, if he gets into space, and we saw this when I prepared for the game the Chiefs played in Green Bay, the thing that struck me about Pacheco, and people don't talk about this at all, is that when he gets into the open field, he's explosive, okay? So when you get him into space and some of those quick tosses that they'll use a lot against San Francisco this game, he's very explosive if he gets a crease. And so that's the dimension. Toughness on one hand, that's what he brings every play. But that explosive element, if you get him into space, that's something that makes him, I think, a little bit more of a special back.
Who are you picking?
I like the Chiefs in this game, and I'll tell you why. Simply because I think they're playing better now. They're playing their best football of the season now, okay? They struggled right through Christmas Day, okay? Lost at home to the Raiders Christmas Day. You saw Travis Kelce, the image of him slamming his helmet on the ground the whole bit. They were really frustrated and lost for most of this season, especially offensively. But the thing I like about them is they got it together down the stretch. They had the tougher road to hoe. You tell me, okay, Miami, then on the road at Buffalo and Baltimore. They beat much higher level competition and nothing against the NFC teams that 49ers came through. But you take a look, if you're looking at this honestly, objectively, those teams I just mentioned in the AFC are higher caliber level teams than what the Niners had to go through in their 2 games at home to get to the Super Bowl. And again, not saying anything disparaging about the 2 teams because the Lions are excellent. The Packers are playing as well as anybody at the end of the season. But you look at what Kansas City did in the gauntlet they came through and how the Niners got to the Super Bowl. And I'll tell you, I like Kansas City right now. And the other thing you mentioned It's not just their running game, but their defense. And you said their defense doesn't get enough credit. Well, up until this season, their defense wasn't a major player in this thing. It was Andy Reid, it was Patrick Mahomes, it was that offense, and the defense would hang on and make an occasional play. This Kansas City defense is far and away the best defense they've brought into the playoffs, and I think it's the reason why they're going to win.
I do respect San Francisco enormously. You're silly if you don't, but they dodged 2 bullets, man. They were outplayed by the Packers, couple of missed kicks. They're outplayed by the Lions, couple of bonehead decisions by Dan Campbell. I love Campbell. He got his team beat 2 weeks ago. I guess I kind of want to see somebody stuff it up the Niners giggy for that reason, to use Terry Boer's phraseology. And although Kyle Shanahan's a numbers guy too, I'm sick of math in football. It belongs in baseball, Wayne. Too many variables in a football game. You agree?
I agree wholeheartedly with you. I think the next gen stats are ridiculous. They're meant only to maim the story and confuse the listener. So, I agree with you, Dan. I think we've tried to take baseball analytics and apply them to football. Football is a much different game, played by 53 men on each roster. The variables that you just mentioned make it so that you really can't count on numbers. Although we're trying hard to put numbers to football, I think there's much more to it than that. That is, for lack of a better word, there's much more spiritual, especially this time of year in football, than analytics could tell you.
As you might be able to imagine, there is an enormous fear factor going on in Chicago right now. The Bears sitting with the number 1 pick, and what to do with it, with Justin Fields still not having answered a lot of questions after 3 years, while Jordan Love had an incredibly impressive first year at the wheel. And, you got C.J. Stroud in Houston Thursday night winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. All the great players who are young players on the Lions. It's easy to be dispirited if you're a Bears fan right now. Question for you is this. How convinced are you that Jordan Love now is locked in as the 3rd consecutive man who can do this in Green Bay for 10 years?
Oh, I certainly think he certainly has shown all of us that he has that ability. There's no question about that. But, Dan, I will offer only this caution, and I think Love will hit it out of the ballpark his second year. I really do, because I think he'll improve his footwork even more. I think he'll be even more accurate. I think he's got a great head on his shoulders, and he's not going to let success get in the way of continual improvement, which is what he's out to do during the offseason. But I will caution everyone on this. We don't know about quarterbacks after 1 year. Okay, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks, especially new quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, have a great year. Can you do it back to back? Can you do it when everyone is preparing for you and now they have tape on you? Now they know how you do your thing, and now they start counteracting that. I think the second year is really critical in deciding, do you have the franchise quarterback? Do you have the guy you can really move forward with? But all the indications are that last 8-9 games of the regular season to the first game of the playoffs, Jordan Love was outstanding, and there's no reason to think he won't be that guy. But I think the second year is where that quarterback proves his mettle, and that's where I think Jordan Love will hit it out of the ballpark this coming year. But we saw the 2 Joneses, Mac Jones in New England, the other Jones with the Giants. We thought both franchises thought they were good enough to move forward with. Now both franchises can't get off of them quick enough. Jalen Hurts had that great Super Bowl, great run a year ago with Philadelphia. This year, second half of the season, not so much. So it takes time all I'm saying is just takes time before you know if that guy is the next Aaron Rodgers or Patrick Mahomes or a quarterback you can move forward with and maybe win the Super Bowl with someday.
What would you do if you were the Bears general manager with that number 1 pick? Put your GM cap on.
The thing that they have to determine is this. What's the ceiling for Fields? Do they know where that ceiling is? And I'm sure he's still got room to hit that ceiling. Is that ceiling going to be good enough to win with? Is that ceiling going to be good enough to pay him $300 million when his contract comes up in a year or so? They're going to have to pay him in one form or another. Is he that good? Now, once you determine where Fields is and how good he can be, now you have to look at the quarterbacks in the draft. If you draft one of those and get rid of Fields, you're going to take a step back, at least temporarily, at that position. But what you're trying to determine is Caleb Williams' ceiling in the end much higher than Justin Fields. And if you determine that, then you're going to make that pick. You're going to pick Caleb Williams. You're going to suffer a little bit in the short term, but then in the long term, you're going to have a guy whose ceiling is much higher, and maybe somebody after you. The other thing you're going to do is you're going to recalibrate the time clock on that position, where you then have to pay the big bucks. Okay, instead of having to do it in a year or so, you're going to have to. You're not going to have to do it for 3 years or more. So there's a lot that goes into it, but the number one thing is this: they have to determine, is the ceiling on these quarterbacks they're considering in the draft higher in the long run than that of Justin Fields? And that's basically it. That's really what it is. I think in all other aspects of that football team, Dan, I saw a tremendous improvement. I think they need another frontline wide receiver, but they have a number one. I think they run the football exceptionally well. And it's not just because the quarterback's been running either. 2 years ago, that was the case. They led the league in rushing because their quarterback rushed for 1,000 yards or whatever. This year was wholly different. They can run the football. And the other thing I like is their defense is coming along. That's, you stop the run. In my opinion, that's the first tenet of defense in the NFL. Stop the damn run. If you can do that, then you can get better off the other things. And I think they did that this year. And I think the Bears are closer to putting it together than people realize. Unfortunately for them, they're still wondering about the quarterback position, and that's the most important position in all of sport.
So you draft Caleb Williams then?
I didn't say that. I don't know.
I'm asking you what you would do, Wayne. I just not with the Bears. You make total sense on your answer, but what would you do if you were the guy in charge?
I would go with Fields. I would stick with Fields.
Really?
I've seen a lot. I've seen Caleb Williams real good, and I've seen him real bad, like at Notre Dame on a Saturday night. It's so dicey. But I think with Fields, I really like the kid. I like what he can do with his legs. I like the fact that I think he's getting better at being effective in the pocket, which is I thought what they did in the second half of the year with him, okay, you want him better in the pocket, yeah, and I think he was a little better there. But where he's at his best is when you move the pocket. I'm not saying run him, get him outside, let him do what Aaron Rodgers used to do at the height of his career, get outside and dance with the devil in space and then wait, make a play. I'm not saying that. I'm saying just controlled, move the pocket, get him out a little bit where he's a little more comfortable, and then his mechanics come into play. I think he throws the football exceptionally well. I think he's a good leader. They love him. They want the players like him. They will follow him. Is his upside as good as some of these guys coming out in the draft? Who knows? And it's still a crapshoot in the draft. I know what I have in Justin Fields. Do I really want to pay him frontline money? I would wait as long as I could on that. But right now, I would stay with him. That's my opinion, based on the little bit I've seen of the quarterbacks coming out. Drake May is no sure bet. Some of these other guys, I don't know. But, it's so hard at that position to make a determination. But I know what Fields is, and I know what I think he can be. And I think that would be good enough if you're strong in the other aspects of the team. And I think the Bears are getting there.
Wayne, I want to ask you for a couple of minutes about the broadcast booths in America. And this is not a topic that everybody enjoys, but a lot of us, starting when we're kids, part of our love for sports has to do with the voices of the game, whether it's Ray Scott or Lindsey Nelson or Jack Brickhouse or Wayne Larrivee for guys in their 40s right now who grew up in Chicago. I was stunned by the stir on social media on Championship Sunday, and I was glad there was so much interest in the booths, particularly the television booths. I'm talking about what seemed like Tony Romo was playing Greg Olson in Championship Booth Sunday, because people were taking sides and viciously attacking both guys, although Olsen drew a lot more compliments. I don't know how much time you spend analyzing fellow broadcasters, but what are your thoughts on the state of broadcasting today? And let's start with the radio booth, which is your bread and butter, and that's where you have excelled for 40 plus years.
Well, I mean, I think where we're going in the business, and satellite radio is a wonderful thing. When you're out and about, you can listen to, and it's an NFL Sunday, you can listen to any number of broadcasts, local broadcasts, even the national broadcast, whatever. You can hear a lot of different things. What I'm hearing from some of the newer guys coming into the business and coming into the broadcast booth is it seems to be, and this must be the directive from the people they work for, it's become more personality driven. And not just your analyst, but the play-by-play as well. And I think what we lose there is the basics of play-by-play on the radio. You know, where's the ball? What down is it? How many yards to go? Who is where in the formation? You know, are they in a shotgun? You know, where's that number one receiver? Is he split out left? Is he wide to the right? Who's going in motion? And then just the description of the play. I think what we're getting in a lot of cases is we get great reaction to big plays. And you know, I think the hyperbole of NFL films and what they do with the radio calls on their stuff, that has kind of put an emphasis on the big play. Just get the big play right. Doesn't matter if you've covered how the ball got to where it got to. Just react and make a great call on the big play. And I think so from a play-to-play standpoint, from a listener, when I'm out riding around and listening to this, I think we're starting to lose a little bit of the descriptive aspect of radio play-by-play. And be honest with you, Dan, that's what it's all about. And none of us give the score enough, by the way. You know, you jump into the car and you just want the score. And I don't give it enough. When I listen back on my stuff, I keep saying to myself, shouldn't you give the score by now? What's the score here? You know what I mean? Because people are jumping in and out. I think you should give the score every third play. And none of us do that. Mitch Holtis of Kansas City, who's one of the legendary guys in this business, does it the best of anybody. Whenever I've listened to him, he's great at that. Just give the score. What the heck is the darn score? You know, I mean, and we all lose it along the way in that regard.
And then Mitch Holtis talks about tasting the sweet nectar of the end zone.
Yeah.
One of his, he's good.
He's
you know,
great.
the good thing
and
is,
Dan, there are a lot of really good guys in this business, really good play-by-play guys, and a lot of them have been at it for a long time and for good reason.
we can see the score, and it's not for everybody. If you're at a tailgate, you can't see it. But when I'm driving in my F-150 muskie fishing, they got the graphics, they got the team logos up for me. You know, they got the Packers helmet, 7, Detroit nothing. So that helps, and maybe that's part of it. Technology is so far. The younger guys just don't think about it. They'll see it on their truck monitor. I don't know. Let's get to Tony Romo, and yeah. Whatever you want to say, you can have. And I'm going to tell you what I think of this guy. And he was given a terrible disservice by not doing an apprenticeship several years ago. CBS leapfrogged every guy who had been paying their dues as a studio analyst or somewhere in a smaller market, and they give him $17 million a year after he excels as a first-year broadcaster because he can predict plays. And he did it well, as could anybody who quarterbacked in the NFL for 10 years when he sees shifts and formations and knows tendencies. I don't think it's too much to ask of a guy to know both rosters. He goes with Spags and Chris Jones. It's all he seems to know on the Chiefs. And it started to tumble on Tony. I think people have noticed he just doesn't seem to prepare very well. And I know people want to be entertained. He can be entertaining. But do your effing job. Know who's on the roster if you're the number one guy on a network. I don't think that's too much to ask. Your thoughts, Wayne Larrivee?
I like Tony Romo, and I really liked him as an analyst when he first came out. And you're right, Dan. The first guy in broadcasting who really did that, predicting plays, you have to go all the way back to the late 70s, early 80s. Hank Stram, when he came out of coaching. He would really do kind of what Steve Stone does in baseball. He would put himself into the coach on the sidelines. What would that coach do? What would he do as that coach on the sideline? What play would he call in this situation? And a lot of times back then, Hank had it right. He would predict the play, and Jack Buck would call it, and everyone marveled over it. When Tony first came out, he had a great insight into the NFL because he had just finished playing. He prepared for all these teams over the course of his career. He knew what their tendencies were, especially with that Kansas City, New England, I want to say it was a divisional playoff game. Maybe it was AFC championship game. And it was at Arrowhead, I remember. He just predicted one thing after another, and everyone just went absolutely bananas, okay? Everybody was beside themselves. Wow, he just knows what these teams are going to do. He's just so, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, he got farther away from his playing career, it seemed like he got farther away from being able to predict what was going to go on or anticipate or give us a clue as to where these teams are coming from and thinking. And people thought his preparation was dropping off. I don't know if it was or not, but I know he received a lot of criticism, not this past season, but the year before. I thought this season he was much more engaged, much more in tune with the teams, that type of thing. But, I guess he had a rough game in that AFC championship game. And, I think we all get caught up in the big personality. So you got Spagnuolo, who's running a great defense in Kansas City now. It's a difference for the Chiefs. It's probably what will make them Super Bowl champions again. He gets caught up in Spags and all this other talk. And then how do you not talk Andy Reid in ad nauseum or Patrick Mahomes? And God knows who's on the team besides those guys. So you get into some of that. On contrast, Greg Olsen is a little more contemporary. His career ended just a few seasons ago, and he has burst on the scene and I think become a really good analyst. And, and now people take a sympathetic look at it because Tom Brady's going to leapfrog him into the number one booth and make $30 million a year. So I don't know. Our business, Dan, as you know, is so subjective. And I just don't have a strong feeling on Tony Romo, whether he's great or not. I think he's good. I think he's enthusiastic. He engages me as a listener. No, his stuff, I think it's still pretty good. But I think if you really want a great analyst, Greg Olsen is it right now. I think he's the modern day great analyst. And they all do it differently. These guys today are a little more X's and O's. Madden was X's and O's, but he brought it down to our level. Just with his boom and all the different terminology he used. He could tell you, and he did a great job of explaining a 3 technique. Now he's going to be just to the outside right shoulder of that guard and that kind of thing, or the center or whatever. He really brought, from a language standpoint, he brought football X's and O's down to our level. I think guys today do a little more X's and O's at their level. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
Yes, and Madden was such a great salesman for the sport early in his career, like Vitale was for college basketball in the 80s. Madden was for the NFL. It made fans out of young people. His video game still is enormous. All these NFL kids who never heard him call a game talking about, I'm doing great in the Madden game this year. They love it. And I wonder who those next guys are, though. Whether you're an analyst or a play-by-play guy, it doesn't seem, and maybe I'm going more toward play-by-play here because Romo has a bigger-than-life persona. I give him that. After Joe Buck, who? Doing games on television. Kevin Harlan's a great broadcaster. He's probably best suited for basketball. He's still very, very good. But who's the network voice who has presence? I don't see it anywhere.
I really like Kevin Burkhardt. I think, he's got presence. He's got a big play call, and I think he pays attention to details as the play ensues. In other words, it's one thing, and we all focus on it. We try to anyway, hit the home run at the time the pitch is made. But how do you get there? How do you work the count? How do you get that team down the field? Because not every play is a huge play. I think Kevin is very good at that. Obviously, I think Joe Buck is the of this age of play-by-play guys. He's the best. Now, again, Al Michaels is a guy from a different age, a little bit. He's the class before. But I do think, Joe Buck is kind of, to me, the standard on television right now. Love Kevin Harlan on radio and TV. I think he does them both exceptionally well. And some of the other guys, they're good. There's some good guys out there. But I want to go back to something you said pursuant to the analyst, and even play-by-play guys. Play-by-play guys don't just burst on the scene. They usually come up through the ranks. Analysts, not so much. It's a matter of your name. Are you the hot name coming out? Romo retires from America's team. He's the hot name. He gets into the booth first. Even John Madden, when he left the Raiders, and I remember this specifically because I interviewed him when I was in Kansas City for a pregame show. He was working on, I don't know, the CBS fourth team or something like that. And he was just for a couple of years, and they kind of gradually moved him up. And by the time he got to the number one chair, he was fully blossomed as a receiver. He was a finished product. He had matured in that regard. And I think that's why he was as good as he was for as long as he was. I loved Enberg and Merlin Olsen over the years. I thought Dick Enberg was quintessential television. He and then Al Michaels, those two guys to me stood out as two guys. Enberg was a poet laureate in framing the picture on television. There are a lot of good people in the business, and the networks have identified a lot of good play-by-play guys. But you're asking for the best, and I think right now today, Joe Buck. I like Kevin Burkhardt a lot. Those are the guys. Kevin Harlan's another guy that they deserve to be at the top of the heap.
Wayne, always great catching up. Enjoy the Super Bowl this weekend, and let's hope when the schedule comes out, we don't see Bears-Packers bookending the season again like we did last year.
I'll agree with you on that, Danimal.
Wayne Larrivee, you can catch him when you're driving around on Sirius XM. Find Packers Radio. He's going to give you the score at least every 4 plays. We'll see if he can get to 3 and match the Kansas City standard set by Sweet Nectar of the End Zone. I'm Dan McNeil. I'm produced by Sam Michael. Adam Delavan is the big boss man at Bet Rivers. Enjoy Super Bowl 58, everybody. Back early next week.